And welcome into another edition of the Yinziders. I'm Jenna Harner. He is the Athletics' Mike DeFabo. And Mike, we are getting ready for our first Sunday night football game of the season. We're in that prime time stretch where sleep is optional.
Yeah, definitely. Staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning, writing off of the Thursday night game, quick turnaround. But this one's going to be exciting. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, against his former team, the Green Bay Packers. And so on today's show, we have Matt Schneidman, who covers the Packers and also covered Aaron Rodgers for a number of years for The Athletic. He's going to break things down from the Packers' perspective, talk to you about how he thinks Aaron might be thinking in this game, knowing him a little bit better than us, and also how Micah Parsons is going to be such a key piece of this matchup going forward.
Of course, and we'll talk a little bit too, obviously, about Rodgers and just kind of the impact that he has had on this team since he's been here. But I think we have to start with the fact that you look at that Bengals loss. The defense, the highest paid defense in the league, looked like one of the worst defenses in the league in terms of both stopping the run and their issues in the secondary. Cam Hayward was incredibly fired up after that loss. And I go back to the quote where he just kept kind of talking about the pride that guys in front of them have had in stopping the run and listed a whole bunch of incredibly legendary Steelers guys over the past handful of years. That to me really stuck out because this team had cleaned up some of those issues. You know, we saw the Vikings game, we saw the Browns game, and you were saying, okay, the run defense is kind of fixing some of those early season problems. Mike Tomlin called it a setback earlier this week, and that's exactly what it felt like it was.
Yeah, against one of the worst rushing offenses in the league, nonetheless. And when I look at it, I think some of the problems are from the fact that they had to play nickel. So you're taking a defensive lineman off the field. Oftentimes, Keanu Benton, your nose tackle, you're bringing in a defensive back. And so, really, where that affects things is you've got two inside linebackers who now have to fit three gaps instead of just fitting two. And they were just not as strong against the run. And there's been a lot of discussion in Pittsburgh about why did they play Nick Herbig more? Why did they play Peyton Wilson more? Well, they were playing their run down linebackers in Alex Highsmith and Cole Holcomb, and those guys weren't getting the job done.
Yeah.
And so now they've got a big test against Josh Jacobs. And like, if you had struggles against Chase Brown, how are you going to fare against a guy of that caliber, Josh Jacobs? But more than the run game, I don't know about you. I thought as much as it was like surprising that the run defense was so poor, maybe the more disappointing thing was the secondary, because this was going to be the big test for the secondary.
100%. And I said this on Channel 11's postgame after the Thursday night game, but all offseason we heard about how much of a Ravens problem this team had. This team took the secondary, the Steelers took their secondary and rebuilt it in a way to match up against T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, with bringing in Darius Slay, adding Jalen Ramsey to this roster, obviously wanting Joey Porter Jr. to take that step forward. And I think you're right. That was disappointing, felt like the word, because you expected those guys, you expected it to be a back and forth kind of contested battle. I don't think you expected the dominance that we saw Joe Flacco throwing the football to both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Chase was targeted 23 times. Like, that stat is still absurd to me.
Yeah, well, especially because the Bengals defense is trash. It's one of the worst defenses you will ever see, and it has been for a number of years. In the last episode, we talked about how, a couple years ago, people thought, oh, it was only Matt Canada was the problem, and Kenny Pickett could be a franchise quarterback. Then they played him the second time that season, and people thought maybe Mason Rudolph got a not a fair shake, and that he could be a legitimate starting quarterback. Then last year, everyone's like, Russell Wilson's going to take the Steelers to the Super Bowl because he had a career day against the Bengals. So my point is, the Steelers should have known, and they did know, they were going to be able to score on that defense. And so as a result, what you needed out of the Steelers defense wasn't even a dominant performance. You didn't have to shut down T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. You didn't even need an average performance. You just couldn't have a disaster. And that's what it was. It was a disaster where Jamar Chase was able to rack up what was a team high or team record 16 receptions in that game. And so, they're going to have to really go back to the drawing board. And the other factor for me is like, it's not like they only did one thing.
Exactly.
It wasn't just one guy. It wasn't just man coverage. They played a variety of different zones, and they mixed and matched and tried to disguise. Nothing worked.
No, and they just couldn't find that solution that you have to find. It feels like, I mean, they got the stop on the second to last drive before Pat Fryermuth's big touchdown, but this is a defense you are paying to make those late game stops. This, how many times have we talked about Mike Tomlin wants his defense out there at the end of games to be able to end this game. And when the Steelers defense doesn't do that, I think a lot of people sit there and say, then what are they paying them for? This is the whole point. This is also the second straight game now where the Steelers have not forced a turnover. And I think that as a team that we know how much importance turnovers hold on this team, how much they work on punching the ball out, all those little things every day, week in, week out, that does make you a little concerned just in, hey, they're not able to create these splash plays, and you can see what potentially can happen when this defense that is so reliant on splash can't create them.
Yeah. So, like after the Patriots game, I have written that the Patriots gave the game away with 5 turnovers. And the response in the comments was, well, you're going to complain that they didn't force turnovers when they don't get any. Here was my point when I talked about that. The Steelers could not stop the Patriots.
No.
The Patriots were extremely effective on 3rd and 4th downs. The Steelers could not get off the field on possession downs. And my point was, if one of the worst fumbling running backs in the league doesn't give it to you 2 times, are you going to be able to get off the field in a traditional sense? And that has not been the case. The Steelers have not been able to get off the field when they haven't been able to force turnovers. And I think that's especially an issue in this game because going into it, Jordan Love has only thrown 2 interceptions. The Packers overall have only turned the ball over 3 times. That's the second fewest turnovers in the entire league. And so you're not going to be able to count upon sacking the quarterback, strip sacking the quarterback, knocking it free from a running back like Josh Jacobs that's so big and bruising and protects the football very well.
Yeah.
You're going to have to stop them on 3 or 4 downs. And to this point, there haven't been a lot of instances when the Steelers have been able to do that because they are a turnover reliant defense.
Let's look offensively here because I think lost in all that we have been harping on and talking about the defense for the last, week and a half, a little bit here at this point. Is that sort of what are we on? When? Yeah, week-ish.
6 days.
6 days. Matt, again, we're in the middle of the prime time schedule where sleep is optional. But this offense, I think, the Steelers offense is really starting to find its identity. They're playing well. I think you take Rodgers' first interception he threw against the Bengals out because that was not a solid play. That was not a smart throw, in my opinion. The second interception, I think you just chalk that up to, hey, the DB made a phenomenal play.
Both DBs, really. The safety coming over and putting a big hit on DK Metcalf. At the same time, the corner was ripping the ball free. It was actually a pretty well-placed ball by Rodgers on that one. But no, I agree with you that I think we're seeing an evolution from the offense. The first couple games, it was short, quick passes, get the ball out of Rodgers' hands, and then create yards after the catch with guys like DK Metcalf. Then we saw them take a step forward. Maybe it was in Dublin where really they started to run the ball more effectively. And that coincided directly with using Spencer Anderson as an extra tackle, tight end, lineman, whatever you want to call him, a little bit more and go into some of these heavier personnel groupings with success. And then the next evolution was the Browns game where finally we saw some shots downfield.
Yep.
And the Browns are a heavy single high team. Aaron Rodgers kept talking about how, well, the reason I'm not taking shots is because we're seeing so much too high. Mm-hmm. It kind of proved to be true. They were by nature of running the ball more effectively, by going to some of their heavier personnel groupings, and by some of the Browns' tendencies, getting the opponent into more single high and then taking advantage by throwing it deep. This most recent game, I think we saw like a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I think we still saw that the running game was successful.
Very.
They were efficient running the football. They were getting to their identity. They were using offensive linemen. They were using heavier personnel groupings. We saw them get the ball to the tight ends a lot.
Arthur Smith's dream offense. Arthur Smith's dream game when touchdowns on your team are only scored by tight
Yeah,
ends.
tight ends only.
Tight ends only. Arthur, this should be band, little band title. Tight ends
But
only. Arthur Smith featuring Arthur Smith.
But I think it was maybe a mixed bag when it came to taking the shots downfield.
Mm.
And that's what I want to I'm kind of curious what we see from the deep ball, or at least some of this intermediate passing as the season continues. Because obviously the interception came
Yeah.
on that play. So, was it just a case where they were successful against the Browns, who had a defensive back that they'd acquired like 3 days earlier that they were able to take advantage of? Or are we going to continue to see the Steelers mix things up and have the right mix of short, quick passes with timely shots downfield? And I think that that's really going to be the key to totally unlocking this offense, is if they can do short, quick passes, run the ball effectively, and take the occasional shot.
One of my favorite things too from the game, and I don't know if you caught this on the broadcast when you were in the midst of all of the things, but the second touchdown to Pat Freiermuth, the long touchdown that put them ahead until the game-winning field goal, Rodgers talked about he saw that exact formation, and that was actually on the long pass to Freiermuth, what had worked so well earlier in the game for him as well. That is that veteran quarterback, that IQ, that football smarts that we know Rodgers has coming into play, but just being able to see that and say, hey, look, we're going to do this. This is going to work in real time. I think that is what's also elevating this offense more, just that veteran savviness. And not to look back and compare quarterbacks, but not even to say like Russ didn't have that. But you look at the knowledge Rodgers has and the way that he changes things so quickly and, all those little things. I think that is something, I don't know if I guess intangible may not be the word, but that's something that he's brought to this team that I think is elevating the play of all of these guys offensively around him.
Yeah, and I think also Arthur Smith has something to do with that as well. Some of
Yeah.
the plays you're talking about, it's like it's like a change up, or like a counter kind of thing. Not a counter meaning a counter run, but just like Arthur Smith will show off defenses something, show them a formation, show them a play, do it repeatedly, and then have like a change up to that where he's been setting up a different play that can be more explosive. And so I think that you're seeing some of that in play as well.
Yeah, no, I think you do have to give him a lot of credit for all that he has done with his offense up to this point, because I think there were some question marks about Arthur
Well,
Smith.
yeah. I mean, I think Arthur Smith sometimes. I mean, people knock him for a lot of things. I don't think everyone's totally on board with the all tight end offense. Um, but I think the best thing I could say about Arthur Smith is, if you just look at his brief time in Pittsburgh, like, he's been here for not even a year and a half, and he's worked
Yeah.
with three dramatically different quarterbacks, and he's found success with all of them.
Yeah.
And so you've got a guy, first it was Justin Fields, where pretty much all he can do is run the ball. He was inaccurate on screens and not particularly good at reading defenses. And so it was all run the ball, highlight Justin Fields' mobility, and take the timely shot downfield. Then he went to Russ. Russ is like
Moonball City.
the opposite. It's either moonball or nothing, very little mobility, and he designed an offense that was completely the opposite. The Steelers threw the ball deeper than anyone else last year, attempted the most, deep shots downfield, most air yards per attempt of any team. Now they bring in Aaron Rodgers, and it's a completely different kind of offense and style, where it's, for a huge part of the season until recently, Rodgers was getting the ball out quicker than anyone else. He was throwing it shorter than anyone else. And so, while there's core concepts like tight ends, running the football, things like that that are central to what Arthur Smith does, and his playbook doesn't completely change, I think the fact that he's been able to take guys in really two cast-off quarterbacks in Russ and Justin Fields that didn't have success in Denver and in Chicago. They come to Pittsburgh. They're able to have a winning season. Now both those guys left, and both of them are benched
Yeah.
while Rodgers is having success. Like, I don't know what would be, if you were considering Arthur Smith for a head coaching job, the stronger case, what he's done with Aaron Rodgers this year, or what's happened to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields.
Let's talk Rodgers here, because obviously this game feels like there's a lot of significance to it. And, as we're recording this, we haven't spoken to Rodgers yet. When this podcast comes out, Wednesday will be the day that we do hear from him. And I'm very intrigued to hear his thoughts, but it's something I've kind of noticed. I feel like he's been subtly talking about this game in press conference settings, just like he'll add a little bit of like, he'll mention it in some certain scenarios when we're potentially not even talking about this game, this matchup. Like he finds a way sometimes to bring it into conversation. And to me, that feels like it indicates there's a little more to this game emotionally for him, whether he's going to tell us that or not. But I do feel like that is the case coming with
Yeah,
into this
there's
matchup.
no doubt that there's more to this game than just whatever it is, week 7, week 8. What are
Yeah.
we in?
What are we there? The bye messes me up because they're 4 and
Week
2.
8.
Week 8. This is week 8.
More than a week 8 matchup. Yeah, so um I think definitely, and we talked about that with Matt Schneidman, where we talked about like that's the next segment. Why we think that this would mean a little bit more to Rodgers. But what I think is interesting before we get into that whole dynamic with Matt, the sliding doors moment here, because in 2019, Ben Roethlisberger is starting to get up there in age, and he tears his UCL or whatever, tears a couple elbow
Ligaments in his
ligaments. I don't
elbow.
think it was the UCL actually, and he's out for the season. And that was a really good quarterback draft.
Yeah.
And instead of looking ahead for their next quarterback, the Steelers thought they still wanted to win within that window, and they ended up trading for Micah Fitzpatrick. Well, that same draft, with a 26th overall pick, the Packers ultimately end up drafting Jordan Love. And they begin moving on from their veteran quarterback. And I think you could look at it a lot of different ways, but at least given the Steelers' lack of postseason success, I think you could say that the Packers made the more prudent decision.
Yeah.
That this is the most important position in football, and it's like it's better to buy a car when you don't need a car, better to look for a quarterback when you don't need a quarterback. And I don't know. I think that you could definitely make a case to say like, hey, there's a sliding door moment here where in another alternate reality, Jordan Love is the Steelers quarterback, and they're not down this rabbit hole of every single year looking for a 1-year Band-Aid.
And it does make you almost wonder, what if, right? Like imagine sitting here saying, what if the Steelers don't trade for Minka and they say, okay, Ben's hurt. This is a good draft. We're going to, he can still ride out the rest of his career, play 1 to 2 more years, but there's going to be a guy waiting in the wings. You do almost wonder where potentially the Steelers team could be, but that's the fun too of always looking back at those drafts and being like, how would you redraft this? But yeah, you do. You do kind of sit there and wonder. This is gonna feel like it's gonna be a fun game, though. I think Steelers fans always love Sunday Night Football at home. Mike Tomlin mentioning that's kind of a big thing that they love, they get excited for. But I feel like the crowd in this game too is going to be interesting because I think there is a lot of respect for Rodgers. It wasn't like I don't know. I feel like when you look at Green Bay, they're like, we miss you and we just hope you're happy. Like we're happy, but we also hope you're happy too. I feel like it's kind of like that
Well,
almost breakup in a
I mean,
sense
I imagine that a lot of Packers fans didn't really agree with the decision,
at
and
the
they
time.
loved Rodgers.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people probably who are Packers fans are going to want to see him do well, but the Packers win the game.
I think that's it. That's exactly it. Well, we will be right back. When we come back, Matt from The Athletic joins us, Matt Schneidman, to talk about the Packers, break down this matchup a little more. Don't go anywhere. This is The Insiders. And welcome back to another episode of The Yinziders. We are now joined by Packers writer for The Athletic, Matt Schneidman. Matt, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. I'm sure you know what we're going to talk about in this segment. It's going to be a whole lot of Aaron Rodgers talk coming your way.
Oh, man. I have marked this game on my calendar since the schedule came out in May. As we all know here on this call, we as reporters love the juicy stories, the big stories, and there may not be a bigger storyline in the NFL this season. Well, I just covered Micah Parsons going back to Dallas a couple of weeks ago, so maybe. But Aaron Rodgers playing against his former team. I said this to Mike, but I wish this game was in Green Bay. It would carry a little bit more weight, but I'm excited nonetheless to get to Pittsburgh in a couple days.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that he ended up in Pittsburgh, but it all started in 2020 when the Packers decided to draft Jordan Love and make him their future at quarterback. Can you take us back to that decision and kind of how you feel like in Green Bay, people now are looking at that and whether they feel like that was the right move for the franchise.
Oh boy, do we have 2 hours? I think I could talk about the whole thing for 2 hours. It shocked everybody. That was a COVID year draft. I remember I was at my home in Wilton, Connecticut, my parents' house, and I was watching the draft. I said, holy hell, they drafted a quarterback. And at the time, there were 4 years left on Aaron's contract.
Wow.
And he was coming off a season in which, I'm trying to remember exactly, he didn't win MVP that year. He won MVP the 2 years after they drafted Jordan Love, but they had made the NFC Championship game in 2019. And they could have used a receiver. They could have used a defensive lineman. They gave up, I think, 186 rushing yards before contact in the NFC Championship game to Raheem Mostert and the 49ers. So, I've since talked with Brian Gutekunst for a big story about that ran last year, but they were looking to trade up for a wide receiver in that draft, either Justin Jefferson or Brandon Ayuk. And obviously those teams who eventually drafted those guys had little reason to trade the Packers their pick. So they traded up, took Jordan Love. And as we know from, when the Packers traded up to take Aaron Rodgers, well, no, they didn't trade up. They just drafted Aaron Rodgers with Brett Favre still on the roster. They're no strangers to kind of doing that. And Brian Gutekunst, who's the general manager now, has been for the last 8 seasons, was a disciple of Ted Thompson, the general manager who drafted Aaron in 2005. So the Packers' belief is the best time to draft a quarterback is before you need one. And that was kind of their philosophy. So they knew it was going to ruffle Aaron's feathers. It did. It kind of fractured the relationship between him and some members of the organization for the next couple of years he was on the team. And infamously, when I talked to Aaron in the 2023 offseason after they traded him, he told me that he did not like Brian Gutekunst, the general manager who had traded him a couple months prior. So I think right now you ask how the fans look back on it. At the time, they were dumbfounded. I think everybody was. And even after Jordan Love started his first game in 2021 against the Chiefs at Arrowhead while Aaron tested positive for COVID, and they lost that game, I think it was 14-6, 14-7. They were like, what are we doing here? And then Jordan gets off to a slow start, his first season starting in 2023. And people are wondering, why do we do this? Why do we trade Aaron? He wasn't declining, but the organization felt in 2023 when they traded him to the Jets that it was time to move on and give Jordan Love the keys. And now I would argue he's become one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think everyone's happy with how the decision panned out, but I still think fans are going to be conflicted. They'll be rooting for the Packers, but you're not going to find a player more beloved by fans, arguably, in Packers history than Aaron Rodgers.
You obviously know him really well, too, from your time covering him when he was with Green Bay. Knowing him, how do you anticipate he's handling this week, and how do you anticipate he's going to handle this matchup on Sunday night?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, so I'm going to go back to when Micah Parsons played the Cowboys. We talked to Micah. He said, it's just any other game, me going back to Dallas. We get Aaron on a Zoom call, which I mentioned to you guys before we started this on Thursday, and I'm intrigued to see what he's going to say. Is it just any other game? As you both know, he's a guy who's probably going to be more honest and less politically correct than some players. So I imagine he'll say, no, it's not just any other game. I know what it is. I played for this team for 18 seasons. It's funny, we had David Bakhtiari, who blocked for Aaron Rodgers at left tackle for a decade, on my podcast with John Kuhn, The Tundra, this week. And Bakhtiari said, anybody who says this is just any other game is lying. It's obviously not.
Right.
So whether Aaron uses that as some added motivation to stick it to the Packers or what, we'll see. I expect him to maybe give a little bit of, okay, it's not any other game. But I still think he's going to hold back a little of what he truly feels going into this matchup.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because going into that week 1 matchup against the Jets, basically as soon as the question was like halfway out of the reporter's mouth, he was saying it's week 1. And like any kind of follow-up, the answer was it's just week 1. It's just week 1. Then when he went and won the game, he took the opportunity to say, I was happy to beat everyone associated with the Jets. But then within that same press conference, he also said, well, I only played for the Jets for like a year or 2, so it's not that big of a deal. It'll be a different thing when I play the Packers. So even then, he was beginning to be a bit more transparent and acknowledge that it was going to feel different against a team where he played 18 seasons and really wrote his legacy. And then even right after they lost on Thursday Night Football to the Bengals, he already was turning the page, and he even said, "Hey, we've got a big game coming up against my former team."
Yeah.
So I tend to think that he may be a bit more transparent, and if he's not, this game definitely means more to him than a normal game would.
100%. And in his appearances on McAfee the past couple of years, he still considers himself a Green Bay Packer in some degree. Like, he still says he loves seeing the Bears lose. He has referred to the Packers as we since they traded him. So sure, he may not like the general manager, who is still the general manager of the Packers, but he has a great affinity for Jordan Love. They got along great. There are, I counted today, I think 9 other players besides Love who played at least a full season with Rodgers. Guys like Christian Watson, who he threw 7 touchdowns to, Elton Jenkins, who was a Pro Bowler blocking for Rodgers, and a couple other guys. Keyshawn Nixon, who, funny enough, when Keyshawn Nixon, who became a 2-time All-Pro kick returner, he's now their number 1 corner, came to the Packers in 2022, he was kind of a cast-off from the Raiders. He came as kind of like this reserved, quiet, special teams player. And one day in the locker room, Aaron walked up to Keyshawn Nixon, who didn't like to be touched, and gave Keyshawn a hug. And they kind of weirded Keyshawn out at first, but he has since told a story about how, he was very timid and shy when he first came to the Packers, but that kind of helped him open up. Like, here's Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback of the team for the last 15 years, giving me a hug, and it kind of opened him up and made him feel comfortable in a new home. So I think, look, I'm not going to sit here and defend Aaron Rodgers and say he's the best person on God's green earth, but I do think, as Mark Murphy and Ted Thompson once said, he is a little bit of a complicated fella, and there are many, many layers to him that I and others will never understand, but I certainly enjoyed covering him for 4 years and getting to know him a little bit.
Yeah, to your point, I'm writing a story this week about the Aaron Rodgers effect, just because I think that there's a ripple effect of having a 4-time MVP and a Super Bowl champion and a guy who's going to go down as one of the all-time great quarterbacks leading your offense. And he has not been afraid to single guys out, call guys out, practice or games. And I think that's actually like a really positive thing for the most part for a very young Steelers offense, because they've got so much youth on the offensive line. And like those guys know, if I jump off sides, Aaron's going to give me a handful or an earful. And so like they're more on their cues and stuff. And like young receivers, young running backs, similar kind of situation. But how about when it comes to the tangible element and what Aaron brings on the field?
Mm-hmm.
How much have you followed him after he's left the Packers? How would you compare what he looks like right now in an offense that mostly relied on short, quick passes early on and now has started to open things up a little bit more as it's found its running game?
Yeah, that I watched that whole game Thursday night. That was probably the first time I've watched a full Steelers game, but I certainly keep tabs on him. And, he's obviously not prime Aaron Rodgers, but he still moves around fine. He still knows where to go with the ball. And I think, you said the quick releases. A lot of teams have been doing that to the Packers this year to kind of prevent Micah Parsons from getting to the quarterback. Dak Prescott did it a couple weeks ago. Joe Flacco's done it the 2 times he played the Packers this year with the Browns and Bengals. I think Aaron, Next Gen Stats, has him as the 3rd quickest release time in the NFL. I think 2.63 seconds behind Mahomes and Dylan Gabriel. So I think, on the field when we're talking X's and O's, he's going to try and do that again. I went back and looked at the transcript from when the Packers played the Cowboys in 2022, and Micah Parsons was in his 2nd year, and Aaron Rodgers said there's not a lot of guys who can do the things that he can do. He's one of one in terms of how he can affect the game from so many different spots on the defensive front. And the Packers came back and won that game 31-28 in overtime. They were down 14 in the 4th quarter. And after that game, Aaron went up to Micah and asked for his jersey. And Micah was telling us a story a couple days ago about how much that meant to him, how that kind of validated what he was doing early in his career. And I say that to say, Micah said on the field, I want to sack him for the first time. Rodgers is one of my favorite players ever. Off the field, he has a ton of respect for him. But that's going to be the matchup I'm watching. And Matt LaFleur emphasized to us yesterday, it's the Green Bay Packers versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, who happen to have Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Everyone knows, and sure, it is. But that matchup of how the Steelers prevent Micah Parsons from getting to a 41-year-old quarterback is what's going to be most important, I think, in this game, because the Cardinals just blocked Micah one-on-one a couple days ago, and he had 3 sacks in a game for the first time in his career. And, a lot of these quick passes that Aaron relies on, he's going to have to get the ball out, because if Micah gets home, I don't know if the Steelers can run kind of like these longer developing plays that they'll need to really beat this Packers team.
And no doubt, it does feel like that specific matchup between Micah Parsons and this very young Steelers offensive line that's, found some footing over the last couple weeks. They played well against Myles Garrett, and they did really a lot to eliminate him from the game as much as you could. But how do you see Parsons looking to take advantage of this young offensive line for the Steelers? And just to building off of that, as the defense as a whole, how does this defense game plan for what the Steelers want to do offensively?
Yeah, I think it's tough because they were kind of grappling with how to defend against these short, quick passes. And what worked for them against the Cardinals was the back end holding up their end of the bargain, taking away Jacoby Brissett's first, second reads to give Micah Parsons time to get home. Because against the Cowboys, Browns, Bengals, Micah and the other pass rushers didn't even have enough time to get home because these quarterbacks were just getting the ball out quick, finding receivers. So if the corners and safeties and linebackers do their job to take away that initial read, that will help the pass rush get home. And I think that's the key for the Packers defense. Regarding how the Steelers block him, it would be insane if, Arthur Smith watches that tape back of the Packers Cardinals game and says, yeah, let's just one-on-one Roderick Jones with Micah Parsons. And who's the Steelers starting right tackle?
Troy Falatanu.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they just, give him one-on-ones against Micah, all season, Micah Parsons has been getting double-teamed and even triple-teamed. And, he's still pressuring the quarterback, but that frees up one-on-ones for other guys. If you just block him one-on-one, you're screwed. Like, he's going to destroy the game the entire time, which is what he did in Arizona last Sunday. So that'll be something I'm watching specifically, is how the Steelers line up to block Micah Parsons, because you absolutely have to do it with multiple players.
And
Yeah, if I were to guess, I think that the blueprint will be what they did 2 weeks ago to Myles Garrett, which was they were in a lot of heavy personnel groupings, sometimes with an extra offensive lineman, and virtually every single snap was at a minimum a tackle and massive 6'7", 300+ pound tight end
Darnell
Washington,
Yeah.
and then also sometimes 325-pound extra lineman Spencer Anderson to create a triple team. I think that's going to be a huge part of their formula. I think that they're going to want to try to establish the run, or at least maintain balance, be in a lot of heavy personnel groupings, and then get the ball to DK Metcalf. Quickly, how do the defensive backs match up with a guy like DK, who's a mismatch nightmare for virtually every team he faces?
Yeah, I was thinking back to a couple of years ago when the Packers played the Seahawks at Lambeau, and Jair Alexander did such a good job of getting under DK Metcalf's skin that DK threw a fit and punched someone in the face and got ejected from that game.
I remember that.
They don't have Jair Alexander anymore. I mentioned Keyshawn Nixon. He's been solid this year, and people had their doubts about him, but he's been solid. That number 2 cornerback spot is dicey, and Keyshawn doesn't shadow; he just plays one side. So if the Steelers want to
Which
get
side
DK,
does he play?
he plays left. So if the Packers want to get DK on a more advantageous matchup, they'll move him to the other side against either Nate Hobbs, who they signed in free agency for $12 million a year, and he's been bad this year, or Carrington Valentine, who's on the bench, and he's kind of their third corner. So, DK is going to be bigger and stronger than most cornerbacks, or all cornerbacks he goes up against. But if the Packers can, get better play from Nate Hobbs or Carrington Valentine and give one of them safety help over the top, which they haven't always done in recent weeks and didn't at times when guys like Zay Jones and Marvin Harrison Jr. were burning guys deep on Sunday in Arizona, then I think they can manage it. But again, hitting DK for those big explosive plays, which the Packers don't give up this year, that will require them protecting enough to give Aaron time to kind of find those. And, you mentioned getting the run game going. The Packers rank first in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per game right now. So that might not be a sure thing either, but there are lapses in games where the Packers just let teams kind of matriculate down the field. It's happened the last couple weeks where for a quarter or two, the defense just looks terrible. So, if there's anybody who's licking their chops and knows what to do against a defense that gives you everything underneath, it's Aaron Rodgers, I would say.
Let's go to the flip side here because, we talk about the rushing yards that the Packers are giving up. On the flip side, Josh Jacobs has looked very, very good. Mike Tomlin gave him a lot of praise when he talked on Tuesday just about what he's been doing. I believe if the numbers are right, he's had 2 touchdowns the last 3 games in a row. Just
Yeah.
how much of a challenge does he present and what is he doing that's working so well for him this season?
Yeah, I think he's getting good blocking up front, but Josh Jacobs is impossible to bring down after first contact. And, he's just, it's so cliche to say, but he's just such a gritty, tough runner. But he's kind of built like a bowling ball, but he's also very quick and can make those quick jump cuts to hit a hole. If you get a hand on him, you're not going to tackle him. You got to get a body, maybe 2 full bodies, sometimes 3 to bring this guy down. And what's interesting about Josh, he's the heart and soul of this Packers team. He's only in his 2nd year playing for Green Bay after signing from the Raiders in free agency. But like last game against the Bengals, or 2 games ago, I should say, he was throwing up all morning and before the game and still went out and had 150 total yards and 2 touchdowns. This past game against the Cardinals, he was questionable with a calf strain that he suffered in Friday's practice. The team didn't want him to play, but he kind of forced his way into the game, scored another 2 touchdowns in the second half to kind of rescue that game. So Jacobs may not, generate any explosive runs at the start of the game, but the way he runs, it kind of wears defenses down. And by the 3rd, 4th quarter, he's getting 6, 7, 8 yards a carry just because defenses are so tired from tackling it.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad matchup for a Steelers defense that just gave up 142 rushing yards to the Bengals that entered the day with the NFL's worst rushing offense. And they've been inconsistent no matter, dating back to last year. They had their problems with the Ravens. They had their problems week 1 against Justin Fields and the Jets. So, stopping the run is going to be critical. But at the same time, the criticism right now in Pittsburgh is falling squarely on the secondary because the Steelers basically rebuilt their secondary to beat the Bengals. And they felt like, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, that is a unique challenge for a defense, but they thought that they were more well-equipped to handle that challenge with Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, Joey Porter Jr. Did not work out well for them. So the question is, the Packers have more than one receiving threat. In what ways could they try to hurt a Steelers defense that hasn't always thrived when they face an offense with a number of dynamic receivers?
Yeah, that's the thing about the Packers offense is they don't really have the true number 1 like DK Metcalf is. And before this past game, the Steelers and the Packers were the only 2 teams in the NFL not to target a pass catcher at least 10 times in a game this season. So Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers both like to spread the ball around. I think what's advantageous for the Steelers is the Packers don't have, like, if Jamar Chase and T. Higgins were on the Packers, they would be the Packers' 2 best receivers. The Packers have a bunch of like number 2 and number 3 guys who are solid, but Jaden Reed, who some would argue is their best receiver, is out for another couple weeks with a broken collarbone. Christian Watson, who's their best deep threat for the past 4 years, might play. He tore his ACL week 18 last year. He was activate or he returned to practice a couple weeks ago. This might be the week that they activate him to play, but we'll see later in the week. But they have guys like Matthew Golden, the first receiver they drafted in the first round in 23 years this year. He's a really good player, but they don't really force feed him the ball. They have Savion Williams, who they don't really give the ball. They drafted him in the 3rd round. Dontavian Wicks. And then they have Tucker Kraft, who is probably their most important pass catcher in terms of being one of the best young tight ends in the league. And he's not really going to stress the cornerbacks, I don't think. That'll be more Golden and Romeo Doubs. I forgot to mention Romeo. He's just a really sure-handed guy. He's not going to take the top off of defense, but if you're in the red zone, look out. He's probably getting the ball, and he's probably going to score a touchdown. So all that to say, they have a bunch of solid receivers, nobody that you're going to, really lose sleep over. But Matthew Golden and Tucker Kraft, I think, are the 2 that you can look at and say, these guys can do real damage for a secondary. And do I expect the Packers to carve up the Steelers like the Bengals did? Not quite, but Jordan Love is certainly capable of doing so if he's on his game.
My one concern when you're talking through these receivers is Matthew Golden's speed versus some of these 30-plus-year-old DBs. I feel like we've in Pittsburgh started to feel like, hey, these guys are 6 and 7-time Pro Bowlers, but they're also now 30 years old, and can
Right.
they run with some of these younger DBs? And I think that's what maybe concerns me the most out of that group is just Matthew Golden, taking the top off the defense a couple times. Okay, so we talked a lot. We've broken this down in a lot of ways, but let's make this really simple. The Packers will win this game if what happens?
That's a fill in the blank. How short is my answer? Do I have to go like one
Open-ended, completely open-ended.
open-ended? Okay.
As an old English teacher told me, as long as a piece of string, however long a piece of string.
Okay. The Packers win this game if they score exactly 27 points. No, all four of the Packers wins this year. They've scored 27 points.
That's the magic number.
And funny enough, Bart Starr won his first championship with the Packers when he was 27. Brett Favre won his first Super Bowl with the Packers when he was 27. Aaron Rodgers won his first Super Bowl with the Packers when he was 27. And Jordan Love turns 27 in 2 weeks. So 27 is kind of the magic number around here. No, but I think tactically the Packers win this game if Jordan Love doesn't turn the ball over. And he's been really good at taking care of the football this year. Last season, I think he had 11 interceptions in the first 8 games of the year. He's thrown 2 interceptions this year through 6 games, and he's just playing really, really good football. He's not lighting up the stat sheet all the time. He's going to give the Steelers a chance at an interception at least once, but it's that aggressiveness that the Packers love out of him. So if the Packers don't turn, and I know the Steelers are really good at taking the ball away. I think they're tied for 4th with like 10 takeaways. You know, their offense, and you know this, I'm just, going over what I kind of researched briefly in my head. They're not gaining a lot of yards, but they're scoring points. And I'm assuming that's because their defense is kind of flipping the field for them, putting them in good spots. If the Packers don't give the Steelers any of those scenarios where they throw an interception in their own end and set the offense up great, I think the Packers win this game by 6-7 points.
One on the flip side, if it's what the Steelers win, if.
Yeah. That's a good question. The Steelers win if, I don't want to cop out and say if Jordan Love turns the ball over, since that's
the exact opposite.
The inverse of that.
I think the Steelers win if they can really get their running game going early and often. Like I said, the Packers are first in the NFL in rush defense. If they can get the run going and really set up the hard play action that Aaron Rodgers was so good at here in Green Bay, then they could be in some trouble defensively and give up some of those chunk yardages that they've given up these last couple weeks. So if Jaylen Warren can get going early, and I'm playing him in fantasy this week, so I hope he doesn't, then I think the Packers offense and Aaron Rodgers in that play action game could have some real success.
Well, now we know that he will, since you are playing him in fantasy.
But I have the Packers defense.
Okay.
Oh,
Interesting.
okay.
That was a pre Micah Parsons edition pick too when we drafted.
Really? Okay. So you probably feel good after they traded for him.
That was a nice little feeling good moment there.
Yeah.
Really good. Well, Matt, we appreciate you. We thank you so much for your time. We look forward to seeing you here in Pittsburgh this weekend. Please let people know where they can find you, get your work, read all of the wonderful stuff you're writing about the Packers and all that you do.
Same place where you can find all of Mike's good work at The Athletic. That's where I am. My radio station just laid me off, so not there anymore. But The Tundra is my podcast with John Kuhn, who played for the Steelers, and I think won a Super Bowl as a practice squad member on the Steelers. But
yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, me and John have a podcast called The Tundra, cool, where you can find wherever you get your podcasts out every Tuesday. So really looking forward to getting to Pittsburgh this week, and thanks y'all for having me on.
And welcome back to the Yinziders. Look who's back. Hi. Oh, Zeke's smiling. There we go. There's a smile for the camera. Zeke is back. It's time for Zeke's picks. Zeke, we're going to start off with Thursday Night Football. The Vikings at the Chargers. He licked his lips when I said Chargers.
I think the Chargers are going to win this one. My uncle was driving me home from a trip, and he said his technique is always go with the home team on Thursday Night Football.
Mhm.
Chargers are at home. They also have a pretty good defense, and I feel like have the right kind of formula to beat a team like the Vikings. And I'm also just not impressed by Carson Wentz, and I feel like the Chargers defense could give him some problems.
Yep, they're still waiting for JJ McCarthy to be fully healthy to come back. So Zeke and you agree there. We're gonna pick some AFC North games as well. Zeke, the Bears are playing the Ravens. Who do you like? I think he licked his lips at Ravens again. Or Ravens there. He licked his lips again.
I think that Zeke is going to go with the Ravens in this one.
See, I'm going the Bears.
So it's you versus Zeke in this one, but Zeke feels like the Ravens went into their bye week, and even if they don't have Lamar Jackson, probably what Harbaugh's telling the team is we have to win the game with our identity. We have to get back to running the football with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's had a frustrating season with all those fumbles, but I think that they can beat the Bears. I think that if it was a better quality opponent, I don't know, but I think they could beat the Bears.
I'm going to be very intrigued about that matchup, and Steelers fans will get to watch them throughout the day. The Jets head to the Bengals to take on.
Did you see Jake?
Oh,
did you see Zeke just shake his head no when you said?
I say Jets, and
Oh.
Zeke. Well, the Jets are also just in complete and total disarray, and I think the Bengals.
He just keeps shaking his head no every time you say Jets.
So Zeke, you're going the Bengals?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not even a question for Zeke. He licked his lips at the Bengals too. You know, take your betting advice from Zeke. We say that cautiously, but
Zeke is the one that was on the Colts before anybody else, if you remember. If you're a loyal listener to Zeke's picks.
And look at them now. We're throwing in a fun one. The New York Football Giants heading to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. The Giants, of course, allowing 33 points to Denver in the fourth quarter to come back. Zeke, do you like the Giants or are you going with Philly? Did they figure it out?
Zeke, do you like the Eagles? Zeke, do you like the Giants?
He turned around,
He just turned around and
is
looked
trying
away.
to walk away. I think he's going Eagles in that one, and I feel like that's yeah. You're smiling. Okay,
I think the Eagles' demise has been greatly exaggerated. I feel like when you're a team that just won the Super Bowl, it's easy to nitpick. It's easy for players individually to get frustrated. They're not targeted as much. I still feel like by the end of the season, the Eagles are going to figure it out and they're going to look like the Eagles again. I know that they have a different offensive coordinator and running the ball that was such an essential piece of their identity hasn't quite been there. But I feel like the Eagles need to start doing what they did to the Steelers. The Steelers' game plan against them last year was shut down Saquon Barkley, don't let him beat you. And the Eagles reminded everyone, they've also got Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. And I think they started to get back to that identity of running the ball and forcing opponents to shut down that run or to try to make them one-dimensional and then proving that there is no such thing.
We have one more game before we get to the Sunday night matchup featuring the Steelers, of course. We're jumping ahead to Monday Night Football. The Commanders heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Zeke, you going Commanders or the Chiefs? I think you just gave me a little side eye, like, why would I not pick the Chiefs? I think that's what I get.
What do you think
from that.
Zeke is thinking about this one?
I think Zeke is looking at Rashee Rice being back for this Chiefs offense and saying, yeah, I like this matchup. I like it a lot. The same thing with Eagles. I think the Chiefs' demise has been greatly exaggerated because, yes, they're older. Yes, Mahomes and Travis Kelce are not the quick-hitting speed that we've been used to seeing them over the years. I still think they're fine. I still think that they're going to be one of the top teams in the AFC when the season's all said and done, and I think they're going to continue to roll here. I think they've found their footing. Patrick Mahomes, too, is playing at an incredibly spectacular rate in terms of his accuracy and in terms of how well he's throwing the football here. Granted, again, they didn't have a lot of receivers to work with. When your number one target comes back, Zeke, are you backing out of that? What?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing is they wanted to get back to being an explosive offense, and Rashee Rice is such a huge piece of that. And so, with him back, I think that definitely makes a huge difference.
Zeke, we need you for one more. Can you come back here for one more?
Zeke, come. Here.
Oh, Zeke, okay. Sunday Night Football. He's going to his bed. This is where he makes his biggest picks. Zeke, are you going Steelers or Packers? Steelers?
Here's what he did. He went to his bed because I think he's going with the home team.
I was just gonna. You read my mind. It's going to home base.
Yeah,
And that's.
I think that that's true because sometimes it's not about who you play, but when you play them.
Yeah.
And for the Steelers to play Aaron Rodgers' old team on primetime Sunday Night Football at home, I think it's like there's so many times with the Steelers where things don't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
everyone felt like, yeah, they're going to lose on Thursday Night Football because they always lose on
That's
Thursday
what
Night
they
Football.
do. Yeah.
And the Steelers at home on prime time in these kind of games where they like to give out what they call the petty game ball, these feel like the kind of games that they win.
And I also think, too, we've talked about the impact that Aaron Rodgers has on this locker room, especially this young offense. I think the offense is going to, and the defense, of course, but I think wanting to win this game for your quarterback means so much more in a game like this. And yes, that's just, always a cliched storyline, if you will. But I do think there is some importance there where these guys want to win every week, but this is a game that they want to win for their quarterback specifically.
Yeah, and I think that they're starting to come together offensively. I mean, I think this is going to be a very tight game. I think it's going to be a 3-point game. I think it could go either way, but just given what I've seen from the Steelers over my life, this feels like the type of game that they would win.
It does. It does. So will our corrections be correct? Are Zeke's predictions correct? We will find out next week. Thank you so much for joining us on another edition of the Yinziders. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Like, subscribe, give us some 5-star ratings. Give us, if you have some good feedback that you want to share, things that you like, things that you want to hear more of. Let us know. I am at Jenna Harner 11 on Twitter. Mike is at Mike DeFabo. I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure.
Pretty sure. Just search him. Check both of us out. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Yinziders.